Hello and welcome to my YouTube presentation. I would like to show to you how to set up my application LittleBrother on an Ubuntu system version 8.12. Of course, the exact version is not that important. I just want to make sure that you know which version I used in this case. Below you see the homepage of my application at GitHub. LittleBrother has been there for about 2 months now, and it's an open source project, so you're invited, of course, to contribute to my application and help, yeah, have fun with it. I hope it will be useful for you. Oops. So, what is LittleBrother? I guess you probably know because you made your way to this YouTube video, but just to make sure, I'll just want to outline a few features of my application. Mainly, it's a Debian tool to monitor and limit the login time of users on Linux clusters or on a single host. Of course, this is usually not used for adults, but for children who kind of tend to exceed their login times, their play times on computers, like my son. So that's the original reason why I started programming this application. It should run on most Debian-based distributions. I use a Debian testing at home, but since Ubuntu is much more commonplace than a plain Debian distribution, I made sure it works there. So this presentation today is based on an Ubuntu 18.10, as I mentioned before, and probably it will run on most other Debian-based distributions too, although I haven't tested. As far as the application is concerned, you can configure it to for several users, as many users, of course, as you have on your system. Each user can have individual schedules for permitted playtime, and these schedules can be made dependent on the days of the week. And in Germany already they can be made dependent on the vacation schedule of the federal states. Hopefully I'll be able to add this functionality to other countries, provided that it makes sense there. Of course, you would have to have a schedule to begin with. What makes this application very practical for me is that I can remotely administer it. I don't have to be at home, for example, to change the permitted play times for my children, because I can access it through the web and change the settings. Because I often receive phone calls from my son because he for example, did something nice at school and he wants to have additional playtime. The application comes in several languages, English, of course, and German, and Italian was added actually a few days ago in a first initial version, and hopefully there will be other languages to follow. So what is the agenda of this video? First, I would like to describe to you the setup of the target system where I install the software. Then I will install the Debian package, of course. I will quickly go through the some major aspects of the configuration file. Of course, I will not dwell on all the different options here. That would definitely be out of scope of this video. There might be other videos coming up in which I concentrate on the configuration of the application. Then a very major step of the installation is to set up the database. We'll assume that we have a MySQL database running on the host. So there is a special script that creates the database schema and preloads important data, and then the application is all set to run. That's what we'll do in the next step. We actually start the application and give a quick glance at the logging file to make sure everything is all right, and then I'll show you the web front end to check the status of the users, and also show you how to do the administration, which is change, for example, the restrictions on the play times. So let's go to the first issue in the agenda, which is the setup of the target system. I would like to differentiate between what you have to have on your system, and which is basically only that you have the MySQL server installed. Actually, the application should run with other databases too. For example, also Postgres should work, and probably also Oracle, although Oracle is probably unlikely on a Debian-based home installation. I only tried it with MySQL. Actually, I did with Postgres, but the advantage of MySQL is that the driver required for the application is preloaded in my Debian package, so you don't have to add additional packages to make it run. But it should, changing the database should boil to changing the database driver to another setting. But as I said, for this presentation, we'll concentrate on MySQL. What you also have to know is that what the root password of your database is. In my case, it's my password, just for testing here. Of course, you have a more sensitive password, a much more secure password. But you have to know it. Sometimes it's a little trouble because you probably installed MySQL a long time ago and you don't remember what your password is. For this installation, you have to find out, and if you don't know your password anymore, you have to reset it. Just Google for this. There are many helping pages out there that you can refer to. Also, to make this work, you have to allow TCP connections to MySQL, which may not be the standard on your system. Sometimes only socket connections are allowed, so you have to change this, and you have to allow root login over TCP, which also may be deactivated on your system. You have to allow this. The root login you can deactivate again after the installation of LittleBrother. That's no problem. But you will have to leave the TCP connections active because the driver used in the Python application uses TCP and not the socket connections. Okay, I will not go into the details of how to configure these issues here. you will have to consult Google. Again, these are very common changes to the MySQL setup, and you'll find a lot of pages helping you there. Okay, what has been done to my system? As I said, at home I run Debian testing. So I cannot show you this installation on my actual server. I need to do this virtually, so I'm using GNOME boxes. The screen that you see here is actually a virtual machine running a standard Ubuntu 18.10, which comes as a box, as a virtual box for GNOME boxes, which I installed. It's pretty bare actually when you download it, so it doesn't have X Windows installed on it. So what I did, I installed the MySQL server, of course. I installed the X Windows system Mate or Mate. I'm not quite sure how this is pronounced in English. And I installed a login manager, LittleDM, to allow logins for several users. Also, I installed two actual users, Seth and Jennifer, who will serve as the guinea pigs for the allowed playtime. Nothing special about those accounts, just two plain Unix accounts. And also, which is pre-installed in this context, so I didn't install any extra package. I'm using a pop-up message tool, Zenity, which will show us messages on the screen. LittleBrother can handle also 3 other messages tools. So you have a choice there. Zenity just happened to be the one which is already installed in this setup, so I didn't have to add any other package. But you're free to choose any other of the 3 if you want to have the pop-up functionality. Okay, so what's next? We actually will install the Debian package. What you would do is you would download the latest package from SourceForge. The page shows you the URL to get it. I will actually use a package which I created locally, which has been uploaded beforehand, which should be identical to the version found there. I don't want to use the download because I don't want to see my downloads increase the counters at SourceForge. I want to see how many downloads there are actually from other people using the package. So I will use this local file. I will install the package using the tool dpkg, which will generate an error, as probably some people of you know, because dpackage doesn't check any dependencies, so it will try to install LittleBrother and find out, well, there are many packages missing, and that's why I will call apt-get install afterwards with the option -f. The -f stands for fix, I think, if I remember correctly. And what it does actually is it checks if there are any packages to be installed which with unresolved dependencies, and then it will start to download the dependencies and then install the packages. This works so far. I have one little bug in my Debian installation script which forces me, unfortunately, to call apt-get install -f twice, because my Debian package tries to upgrade or needs to upgrade the pip tool, the Python pip tool, to a pretty recent version. I think it's number 19, version 19, and somehow the installation gets mixed up because the upgrade is in the same context as the actual installation. So basically during the first run it upgrades pip, and in the second run it manages to download the pip packages and install the application. Okay, so this is what we'll do now. I show you the folder which holds the Debian package, and what I will do is I'm gonna copy this package to a local folder. So this folder that you see here is not local in the virtual machine. It's on the host. So I'll use a second tab to open the temp folder. I'll copy the version 0.1. It's the revision 36 over to the temp folder, and then I use a root terminal to actually do the installation. So I call the package install temp LittleBrother Debian and see what happens. And what you see here, actually it's in German, but people, you probably are familiar with the typical errors occurring during depackage. It says that, for example, here the Python 3-pip package is not installed. That's what I mentioned before. There is a dependency missing, which we have to resolve now. I call actually, before I call apt-get install, I make sure I have the latest version of the packages. I call apt-get update to make sure the packages are okay. So, and now I call apt-get update, install-f. That should fix the dependencies, and as you see, it starts downloading the Debian packages, or the Ubuntu packages in this case. Please bear with me if I say Debian instead of Ubuntu, but I've used Debian for about 25 years of my life, and Ubuntu is pretty new to me, so I get confused most of the time. So this takes a while, and it should end up in an error because of the upgrading issue with pip. Now it's almost done. It's handling the triggers now. Now it's actually installing the packages. Python 3 is one of the major components. And now it's exiting with an error. And I haven't analyzed exactly what's wrong yet, but one quick fix is I started again. And what's happening now is that it's actually downloading the pip packages. The black bars that you're seeing now is the downloading of the pip packages. It's installing them. it's done. As you can see, it has installed quite a few pip packages, Flask being one of the major components, and also the LittleBrother package itself. Where is it? Here you can see it, LittleBrother 0.1. So that's the main package. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. So we are through with this. Now I would like to show you just 3 aspects of the configuration file. As I said, there's a lot in there which would exceed the time which I would like to spend here in the presentation. You'll find most options explained in the sample configuration file, which are part of the GitHub repository, and there is also, or there will be actually after this presentation, the version that I used here, the specific configuration file to look at, and there are a lot of comments inside the configuration file to help you set the right options. Okay, so let me concentrate on 3 aspects. The first one is the persistence aspect, which relates to the database. As you can see here, I'm using the database driver MySQL, PyMySQL with a plus in between. This special string tells the database abstraction layer, which is used in my application to use MySQL, the main MySQL driver, but also with the flavor of PyMySQL. If you are interested in what flavors are available, you can see them following this URL in the original SQL Alchemy documentation. SQL Alchemy is the pip package used for LittleBrother. It's the database abstraction layer. So I'm using the database on the local host. I'm using the default port for MySQL, which is 3306. There will be a database created, a scheme name, LittleBrother, and also the user created to access the database will be called LittleBrother, and it will be given this password, my LittleBrother's password. Of course, you would use a more sensible password in your application, in your setup, I'm sorry. Okay, the second section I would like to show you is the status server. That's the web server, which will display the status of the application and allow you to do the administration. And if your server is accessible from the outside, you will also be able to do the remote administration. So this is done on the local host too, and I'm using port 5560. Any port is fine, of course. I'm using the administration password hello, which we'll use in a while. And the app secret, of course, should be changed. I'm using the standard one here. This will be used to create cookies. It's in our case, and for our presentation, it's not really relevant, but it's part of the status server configuration. And the third part is the pop-up handler. As I mentioned, you can use 3 different tools. One is called YAD, then there is GX message, Zenity, and YAD is there twice. Ooh, this is a oh, I'm sorry. I'm just discovering that there is some error in the documentation. There is a 4th one, of course, which I forgot right now. I should definitely correct this. There's encoding information and some setting for a timeout so that the same message is not displayed too often in a row. Okay, so this is the configuration file. I will do this now in the more or less in the same way as I installed the actual Debian package. I have this configuration file on my host folder, LittleBrother config. I copy it over to the temp folder here in my virtual machine, and now I use the Emacs to, oops, I have some files open that shouldn't be there. Of course, this is not really interesting because the passwords there are only local on my virtual machine. I will use the temp folder. There's the configuration file, and I will write this file to the configuration folder of LittleBrother, which is /etc/LittleBrother, and then I will open it. Oh, this didn't work. No, it didn't work. Let's see. Okay, this looks better. Now it should be there. Yeah. So as you can see, I have the file littlebrother.config there. The other three are actually the sample files that you will get. These are 3 sample files for different setups. There are 2 setups for the master, a minimal master configuration which has a very simple rule set, and there is a multi-rule master, and if you want to run it on a cluster you also need a slave configuration, which is considerably shorter than the master configuration. This should be put in any other PC that should be monitored too, and basically it only has to provide the setup, the configuration to communicate with the master. Okay, but in this case we are running a single host machine, and we'll run the LittleBrother config here. I will change the owner of this to LittleBrother, although it's not really required. It's only required that the user LittleBrother can read this file. Of course, since it has passwords in it, we should also make sure that nobody else can read it. So I'm gonna remove read, write, and execute rights to group and others, which only makes it readable to LittleBrother. Okay, so I go in there. This is the whole configuration file, and see, let's just take a quick look at the status server, for example. You can see it's the same setting as in the presentation. Okay, so we're done with this. Now comes the important moment. We'll try to actually start the application. We're through with the database setup. No, we're not through. We're just starting it with the database setup. The database setup is done by running this script. It's a little tool script, run LittleBrother python. And the important part is the create databases option. And we pass the configuration file, and we pass 2 additional options, which pass the which define the credentials for the database root user. Okay, these should usually not be part of the LittleBrother configuration file, although they can be. I wouldn't advise you to do this because you only need them during the installation and not afterwards. Okay, this just has to be a user which has the rights to create other users and databases in your MySQL installation. So it's sufficient to pass this on the command line when calling the script LittleBrother. I'm not gonna copy this string from the presentation because it contains line breaks which are a little nasty. I have the right string on another editor outside your viewing port here, and I will copy them over to my root window. I already have the my password set, which is correct for my MySQL installation, so hopefully this will work. I'm going to start the script. And it doesn't work. Okay, there is a little problem with the configuration file, which I kind of screwed up because I took a version which is a little older than I expected. Yeah, the problem is here, for example. I added some comments to the actual settings which is not understood by the parser. This was 10 seconds. The minimum waiting time before repeat. Yeah, okay, let's see. That was the one, hopefully. Yes, now it runs through. So you can see it created the database LittleBrother. It created a user with the same name, LittleBrother, and it granted access to the database for the database to the user LittleBrother. So the application, which is run by the user, the Linux user LittleBrother, should be able to access the database now, and that's what we will do next. We'll start the application. I use this call here, system control start LittleBrother, and hopefully it will return. This is always a good sign. If it could not be started, it would have most likely shown some error here. And what I will do is I will take a quick look at the logging file. So let's see what's happening here. This is the end of the logging file. Actually, it's trying to kick out the user set. I'm wondering why this is happening. Oh, maybe he was actually still logged in. That's interesting. Because I did some tests beforehand with the two users, Seth and Jennifer. Anyway, this looks good. I mean, there's no error in there. So let's see if we can start the web interface. So I'm gonna close this. We'll show the front end here. Actually, there's one thing that we have to do. To see the pop-up messages, we'll have to give LittleBrother, the local user, LittleBrother, the right to create X windows on the local system. I'll do this here simply by giving this right through the root terminal. Of course, in your setup, you will not give this right to the root terminal, which is not really a good idea. In the README file on my site, you will see how to do this for the user that you try to limit the time of. Okay, you will, for example, use a typical login script of the X Windows Display Manager to execute this statement. Of course, only if you want to use pop-up messages, that is. Okay, and now we'll start a web browser. I'm using Firefox in this case, and I have a bookmark for LittleBrother at localhost. Okay. It starts out in the status, on the status page, which gives you a list of all the users that you're monitoring. It's Seth and Jennifer in this case, and their current status. This is the interesting column. It shows a red sign if there's no activity permitted right now, and it shows a green check mark if it is allowed. So both users, Seth and Jennifer, are not allowed to play, and here in this column it tells you why they're not allowed to play. You have to look at the time now. The current time in Germany is almost 2 o'clock in the morning. So there is no activity before 1600 hours for Seth, and there is no activity before 900 hours for Jennifer, so it's too early for both of them. Actually, there is a second reason why they cannot play, which is interesting, because they have not reached their minimum break time. The reason is that they have been logged in both, apparently, and have been kicked out by the system. This was an obvious mistake that I made in the setup that I'm using right now, because I didn't want them to be logged in when I started the presentation. So this is a little inconvenient, I would say, right now. But let's see what we can make of the situation. So first I'm going to show you what happens simply on the root terminal when I try to log in as Seth, for example. I do a superuser -Seth, which opens a shell for Seth. And you can see Seth is active, but not for long, because after about 10 seconds, this interval can be configured. The LittleBrother application finds out that Seth is active, and it tells Seth via pop-up that it's too early to use the computer, you will be logged out. Okay, so this is a typical message. This is the format that you see is the Zanity logup tool. There are other tools, as I mentioned, which have different types of windows, so you can use whichever one you prefer. The same will happen to Jennifer, of course, when I log in as Jennifer, which is also possible for a few seconds, and then Jennifer will be kicked out because it's too early to use the computer. Okay, now what I will do is, since Jennifer is a night owl and she wants to play at 2 a.m. in the morning, I'll give her some special treat. I'll use the administration panel and log in. The user is admin and the password is hello, as you saw in the presentation. I'm going to save this, and I go into Jennifer, and this is the day to day, you can see, and up to, in this case, 14 days in the future, which allows me to change the settings for each of these days. So I'm going to today, Sunday, and I give her the special treat of free play. Okay, I'm going to activate this and save this. And there are several things that happen. First of all, the red mark changed into a green mark, which says Jennifer is now allowed to play. And you can see here on the administration panel that I changed the default setting, which is off for free play, to on. So you can easily see where you overrode the standard setting. Okay, when I go back to status, you can also see that Jennifer is now green. She's allowed to play. So when I go to the root window and log in as Jennifer, you will see nothing. Oh, no, you actually, interesting. This is rather new. I'm surprised by the new feature a little bit. Jennifer gets the message that she has unlimited playtime in this session. In case she didn't have unlimited playtime, but for example a playtime of 1 hour or so, then she would get an according message of the number of minutes that she's allowed to play. And you can see she remains logged in. When I update the status page, you can see now that the user Jennifer gets a blinking entry here. The current activity started at 1:55 in the morning, 54, I'm sorry, and the current duration of the activity is 0 hours and 0 minutes. So she just started. I can open the details on the application. I'm sorry, on the user, and you can see I can even drill down to the day, which is today here. The same entry. It's 1 hour 54 minutes in the morning, 1 o'clock, so 1:54 in the morning, and she's currently using the application from a system called Ubuntu. This virtual machine is called Ubuntu. If you have a cluster, you would see the name of the configured computers here, so you can tell from which machine, on which machine the users have been logged in. So let's update this a little bit. See, it's up to 2 minutes. I'm gonna log out now. Jennifer leaves the system, and after about 10 minutes, LittleBrother gets notice of it. See that Jennifer actually played for 2 minutes today, and the blinking is gone. There's no current activity. You can see the start time and the end time of the previous activity. So this is all accumulated. If you have a cluster, that's interesting for our setup here at home. My son, for example, is allowed to play on different computers, and the play times are accumulated. Okay, so this basically is the end of the presentation. So you get an impression of how my application works and how to install it, how to configure it, how to use it as a first try. Of course, there's a lot to configure, to change the rule sets, for example, the times that the user is allowed to play. You will find this information on my homepage, on the homepage of LittleBrother at GitHub, and there's also a Facebook page called LittleBrother Debian, which you can refer to. And for any questions or remarks or whatever, you can send email to web.de. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you'll give my application a try. I will really be looking forward to your feedback. Thank you very much.